Добрий день, з вами Ольга Атаманова. Я рада
Good afternoon, my name is Olga Atamanova and it's my pleasure to see everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's day 631 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and now we will be talking about the situation in Luhansk region. Joining us online is Artem Lysohor, the military governor of Luhansk region. Good afternoon, Mr. Artem. Good afternoon, Mr. Artem. So right away I would like to ask you about the situation on the forward edge of the battle area for the time being. I mean the forward edge running through the Luhansk region, and what is the situation in those settlements that were freed from the Russians? Well, you know, as the military said, the situation is difficult but under control, because our fraction of the forward edge of the battle area is a complete battle hell, because the enemy doesn't count either military or civilians. During the night we have about 140-150 shellings, more than 500 launched projectiles against the settlements that were liberated during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. We've evacuated the majority of the people from those places to safer regions, but some of them still remain there. We continue negotiating the negotiations to safer territories with them, but people hold on to their land, and only when the situation becomes real hot, people start evacuating. The community provides them with all the basic necessities, including meals, hygienic products, and heating products. Just yesterday we were going out on a mission with the law enforcement agencies, supplying people with the solar batteries, candles, logs, everything they need to stay heated, to stay warm. We continue providing all the necessary support, and within the last 3 weeks the alleyways of approach become more and more difficult, because the enemy continues shelling all the logistic ways, including the pontoon and bridge crossings and the villages and towns themselves. Mr. Artem, so what's going on with the critical infrastructure in those places? You've mentioned candles and flashlights. Do the people have heat and electricity supply over there? Can they basically live there? Well, it's clear that there are no critical infrastructure facilities surviving there. People use solar batteries, they use petroleum generators, petroleum-based electricity generators. Now they procure the logs for heating during winter. All the critical infrastructure facilities were destroyed by the enemy, and for the time being we have no opportunity to supply electric power or heating or water there. Well, you understand, the areas are very close to the forward edge of the battle area. This is why any repair works will result in another shelling and threat to lives of the repairing teams. Mr. Artem, what about the support of the inhabitants of the Luhansk region who were evacuated? How do you continue supporting them? Well, 187 persons who were evacuated to the territory under Ukrainian control, they continue receiving support from the local governments and the central government. Just yesterday we voted for the decree to amend the order on the destroyed property. So during the last 3 months we were collecting data about the destroyed property of the denizens of the region, and shortly we are about to proceed to the practical phase of extending funding to the people. We're working on the scheme. So for the time being, has anybody already gotten the reimbursement for the destroyed property, or the preparation stage is finalized? Well, we've just finalized the preparation phase, because it was set in the order that only the property located in the occupied territories that was destroyed can be compensated for. And now we added the property that is located on the occupied territory. We only need the geographic coordinates, their deciphering, and after the finalizing of deciphering the data, we will proceed to extension of funds. Mr. Artem, let's talk about the situation in the occupied part of Luhansk region. Are we able to set any communication with the people who stay there? Can we communicate any information to them about what's going on in the territory under Ukrainian control? Well, we cannot describe the methods that we use to contact those people, because as soon as such information emerges on the enemy side, the people start getting oppressed. The inspections are initiated in their regard. The enemy inspects even the telephones of the students, of the school children in the schools and higher educational institutions, and the enemy tries to end any communication of those people with their relatives on Ukrainian controlled site. The enemy blocked more than 50 VPNs last week, and also they suppress all the broadcasting signals. They pay real good attention to this because, as you know, in Russia, zombifying of people is the first thing they're doing. That's their key criteria, but the situation is not changing within the last year. It's critical for the people because almost all of the settlements on the distance of 50 kilometers from the forward edge, they have no electricity supply. Only in some blocks the enemy supplies the electricity using the power generators, but that's a minor fraction of all of the buildings that are disconnected from electricity supply, and thus the people are suggested to move to the territory of Russian Federation or to such a mobile heated premises that the enemy brings there to make sure the people just don't freeze to death. Talking about meals and medical products, the medicines, everything that gets in that area only ends up there at some crazy cost, and there is a huge problem with the medicines out there because the majority of the medicines that are of need for our citizens, they only come from the they only come to the occupied territory from Russia in critically small amounts at very high cost that people cannot really afford. Talking about the government programs to cover the needs of the vulnerable categories of population, those programs don't work at all, so the situation is real critical. We hope and we believe that those territories will be deoccupied shortly to make sure that those people who stay there have their basic needs covered, as well as the worthy conditions of living. Mr. Artem, do we have any idea of the number of our population who remain in the occupied part of Luhansk region? Well, it's difficult to count now. We cannot trust enemy sources. They've demonstrated the figure of 1.6 million of citizens who voted in the occupied territories, because even since 2014 this figure was not corresponding to the reality. It's very difficult to calculate the number of those who left those areas. You know, the figures are fluctuating. Some people left for Russia. The majority of the people left for the territory under Ukrainian control or European countries after the beginning of the full-scale aggression, so the exact figure is currently unknown. Mr. Artem, we know, for example, that in Mariupol the occupiers continue bringing Russians there, mostly the representatives of national minorities of Russian Federation. Do we observe any such situation with Russian population being brought to Luhansk region? Well, it's illogical because we know in the area of Svatova, a couple of brigades staffed with the national minorities, they were moving to Luhansk region, and the majority of them were coming with the families, and they just dwelt in the empty houses that were left behind by the Ukrainians who fled from the occupied territories. And we have to understand Russia will do everything they can to increase the percentage of the population of their origin to influence on the conscience of the Ukrainians who were left there, just saying that Russia would help them. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Do we have questions on the floor? Good afternoon, Valentina Rihal, Ukrinform. Recently it was reported that Brzezinska community received a heavy construction material. Do we know how that material will be used before the deoccupation of the communities? Yeah, right, we've just received that machinery a day before yesterday, thanks to the support of USAID. So 4 communities receive the machinery, the construction machinery that will help them in recovery of the region. In some areas we can start using this machinery before the deoccupation. We have a lot of communities located along the forward edge of the battle area, but we currently are accumulating the material resources that will be necessary for the recovery of the territories. Mr. Artem, and to finalize it, there is a question about a resistance movement in Luhansk region. If you can disclose that information, how efficient is the operation of the resistance movement in Luhansk region? Are there any results of their activities over there? Well, look, the resistance movement is a military topic, but I think this month everybody had seen the results of the work of the resistance movement, such as call for fire to the bases of the enemy, their ammunition depots, their large bases. So the resistance movement continues fighting, and they will make it. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining our broadcast. Dear colleagues, thank you for the interest to this topic, and we continue working together for our victory. Right now our team is working on putting together the schedule for tomorrow, so please follow our announcements, stay tuned, and we want to thank our security and defense forces. Glory to Ukraine!